know, I need about 4 or 5 months. You know, I've got to do some research and I need to get some books out and you know what I mean? And so, you know, he's still doing his research and thinking about it, but he's never getting there. I'm sure you can all relate. I'm seeing lots of nods. You guys are very responsive. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about overwhelm and where it stems from. And overwhelm often comes from perfectionism. Okay? And interestingly enough, where does perfectionism come from? I mean, it all kind of boils down to psychology and then it boils down to spirituality. You know what I mean? You keep boiling the pot down. And eventually it's all energy and nothing matters. Don't you hate those people? It's not real anyway, nothing matters. Okay, so, really. Okay, so this is one of the core things about overwhelm is that it comes from a perfectionistic mentality. So we want the concept of going into a perfect process and creating a perfect product. And the fact is that creative process is messy, and it's challenging, and it's not always fun. And it can take discipline and all those things that I've hinted at, and it's not perfect by any means, right? So this is one of the biggest things that leads into overwhelm. So what did I write here? The feeling of overwhelm triggers. So when you're overwhelmed, it triggers fear in the brain, and we're really going to get into that. We're going to talk about a little bit of brain science. Don't worry, I'm going to make it really easy to understand. And a few other things. I need some water. My mouth is like getting parched. I have to share this with you guys. Okay, did you guys see the movie Just Like Heaven? Anybody? No! Oh my God, that's one of my favorite movies. And the guy says, do you have a cola or something? I'm like 99% parched, and then he takes the cola and whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, it's a really funny scene.
Who was the actor?
I don't know, but he's kind of famous. He's like a... Anyway, it's funny. Okay. Okay, let's stay on topic here, but I'm glad you guys are laughing. So overwhelm, so information overload, and that's really common in today. So especially those people that are busy researching how they're going to make their creative dream happen, right? They're getting all this information, which isn't bad, but it's like a point where you're like, are you going to do it? Okay. And then what about comparison to other people's work? Or comparing where someone else is at? This is what I often hear, especially from older people. Oh, well, so-and-so, they're like 10 years younger than me, and they've already written 3 books, you know what I mean? So why should I bother, right? Another thing that stops artists. But okay, so a big one for overwhelm is setting yourself up with high or unrealistic expectations, okay? So you're hoping your first novel is going to be the great Canadian novel kind of thing. And looking at everything that needs to be done at once. And another facet of being overwhelmed is not knowing where to start. There's a million avenues, and you just don't even know where to start. And again, as much as all this sounds depressing, here's the great news, is if you know what the problem is, you can solve it. Okay, the other thing about overwhelm, and this one here is probably the hardest thing to bite off and chew, and you don't have to bite it off tonight, you can let it sit on the sidelines, is that sometimes being overwhelmed is a habit. It's a way of being in the world, and it's something you have to change about yourself. And that's hard sometimes, because we're used to like texting someone and then like checking our iPhone, and I don't know, I don't even have a cell phone. Everyone's like, that's so weird, how do you manage? And I'm like, perfectly fine. But you know, we're so used to like everything, like kids calling, driving, school, making the kids lunches, and it's like we're thriving in this overwhelm where there's no time to just stop and be and write or paint that wall, or man, I wish some more of you would share some of your dreams so I could refer to them. You know, make a TV production. I know your creative dream. Okay, but you know what I'm saying is it can become a habit. This habit of just kind of overwhelming ourselves, and then we never really get to what we really want to do or who we really want to be. You know, sometimes we just have to stop it and change it, and that takes time. Any other input on overwhelm and how that comes up? Yes, gentlemen in the back.
You're talking about self-defeating behavior.
Yeah.
And often that comes out of perfectionism.
Yeah.
You're sort of shooting your feet out from underneath you before you even get on the process.
Exactly, which can also spiral back into that fear of success, and so you self-sabotage. And a lot of artists do self-sabotage themselves. They get so far in their career with a project, and then they fall short because of going into that self-defeating behavior, lack of confidence. There's so many things. Yeah, Rothko, yeah. Okay, so self-defeating behaviors. It's quite complex, and I'm an artist, not a psychologist. Yeah?
What do you think would be the best way to determine if your feeling of being overwhelmed is reasonable or not?
What do you mean reasonable?
Like, if there's good reasons to be overwhelmed, if it's a fear that's rational.
Well, it doesn't matter the reasons. What I'm here to share with you tonight is my goal and my hope is that you can leave tonight and maybe start making steps towards having your dream come true. So I don't care why you're overwhelmed or if it's reasonable or not. What I do care about is that you can identify it and go, okay, and then maybe with the tools, because we're talking about problems now, which is the sucky part of the talk, but I have 20 minutes, so I gotta get going here, about how you can overcome these things. So I don't know if I totally answered your question.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes?
There's also this feeling of having to plan it all out ahead of time, of
Yeah.
having it all created in my head before I even started.
Yeah, it's gotta be perfect, so, you know, you gotta plan it out. Okay, so we're getting into the fun part, which is how can we get beyond these blocks? And the good news is you can, and I'm living proof, which is kind of weird. But it's great weird. Okay, so just wait for this to start up. And hopefully you see a photo of the brain. Okay, so this is our little science lesson for the day. So the outer part of the brain is the cerebral cortex. And that's the part that is responsible for creative thought and thinking. Okay? And then that other little thing in red is the amygdala. And that's what, as creative people and artists that are making your dreams come true, you have to get intimately knowledgeable about your amygdala. Is anyone familiar with the amygdala and what it's responsible for in the brain? Yes?
I think it's responsible for emotion and aggression and things
Great.
like that. Yeah.
So let's summarize that. Thank you. What's your name?
Mark.
Mark, thank you. You guys are such a great crowd. By the way, thank you so much. This is my first public talk and you're making it so easy. Seriously. So fear, fight and flight. So fear and flight is kind of like the fear thing and fight. So that's what the amygdala is from. It's a, what would be the word? It's an older part of your brain that was there for your survival. Yes?
Like your reptilian brain?
No, the reptilian brain is the lower part. But it might be part of it. I'm not a brain scientist. You guys can Google it when you get home. How's that? Homework. I hate homework. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing, is when you have a really big idea or a dream, which could be to paint a wall in East Van. How big is that wall? Yes, you and the sunglasses.
I would say like double the size of your screen.
Okay, so that's a pretty big wall. Would you guys agree?
A little bit less.
Okay, but it's pretty darn big. So this guy's dream is to paint a wall. So he has a pretty big idea. So this is what happens in your brain when you have a big dream or an idea. You want to write a whole book or paint a huge wall. Is that idea, before it can get to the creative part of your brain, the cerebral cortex, is it hits your amygdala, which is center for fight or flight. If the idea is really big, alarm bells go off and oh my God. All those things that we've been talking about, this stops, you get set off, drama, and you get emotional, and you're scared, and you procrastinate, and then you feel overwhelmed. That's triggered, and then that idea can't go through to the creative part of your brain, the cerebral cortex. Does that make sense? So it's like you short-wired yourself, okay? So, so there's the greatest way around that, and if you're a reader and you like to collect information, there was one guy over there. It's summarized in this book called Kaizen by Dr. Robert Maurer. Okay, but I'm giving you the Coles notes. You don't even need to read the book. The Coles notes are that if you can break any idea down into small enough pieces, you can bypass the amygdala and hit your creative cortex, and boom, you can take action. So when I think of something, here's my litmus test. Does everyone understand that? Like that concept of the litmus test on how small your idea is if you can do that in under a minute, you're there. So if you got a little piece of paper that I was passing around, I didn't forget, and you wrote your dream at the top, I want you to write down one small step that you could take that is so small it's almost laughable. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple examples if you're stuck. Like, let's say right now I'm working on a painting, okay? And I do this all the time. Okay, everything I'm sharing with you, I live. It's not just, I'm not just standing here going, oh, do this. I do this so that I've been painting for 10 years, so I can do painting. And that is, like, last night before I went to bed, I went to my studio, and I put a paintbrush. It was a tiny paintbrush, the paintbrush that I want to use for my next painting, next to the painting. That's all I did. That's how small. It took me about 10 seconds. And that's called bridging. So I'm setting myself up for success. So I know when I walk to my studio in the morning, I'm going to go to that big painting, and I'll see that brush, and I'll go, oh yeah, I know I put that brush in because I was going to start blending some of like the whites with the pinks, you know what I mean? So my challenge for you right now, and I suggest if you're one of those people, oh, I'll do that later, I would do it now. I challenge you to just write out one little small thing that would take you less than a minute that would support that creative dream that you wrote at the top.